My name is Benjamin Kepner. I am the CEO of Global Social Media Marketing and SweetCourses. And today we're going to be talking about how do we actually take marketing data and turn it into something that is usable and plausible for us in both of our companies and for your clients or companies as well. So here's a little bit about me. I have been doing reporting for quite some time, right? I actually, as I had mentioned at the beginning, I'm the CEO and CMO of GSMM, which is a digital marketing agency based in Colorado. I am also the CEO and CMO of SweetCourses, which is an e-learning platform. And we have taught data analytics courses with the companies you see here on the right, such as Udacity and Madecraft. And also, I have 15 years of marketing experience, as well as I'm currently pursuing my master's in AI at Purdue University. Boiler up, hammer down. Okay, so here's our agenda for today. We are going to be turning data into reporting dashboards, using AI to write monthly marketing reports, delivering faster reporting and implementing human review, summarizing complex dashboards into executive-ready insights, and building a repeatable AI reporting system that we can kind of repeat and rinse over and over again. And we will also have a special bonus for many of you at the end. So you're going to want to kind of stick around and see if you can get this discount gift. So what's the core problem that marketers are facing right now in 2026? As per Marketing Profs report, marketers say they spend about 24% of their data-related time collecting data, 22% analyzing data, 20% visualizing data, 19% cleaning data, and 18% presenting data. So just because we get some pretty looking dashboards like you see here on the left, that doesn't always mean that we're going to get the best insights, right? They give you access to kind of those visualizations like things such as data, charts, metrics, but they don't actually explain what that data is going to mean in a translation for the business. Now, reports don't always, for whatever reason, reach to actual business decisions. So many reports are just kind of focusing on here's some numbers, here's some trends, but it doesn't actually help you make a decision after you read the report. And then there's a lot of time that's spent, right? Marketers today are still doing this manually. They're putting it in spreadsheets. They're using a dashboard that doesn't have all of the data sources connected. Their KPIs are not clearly defined. They're showing too many, maybe like awareness or engagement tactic metrics when the client's really focused on more of a performance-based approach. And so that's ultimately not going to help us kind of shape our overall marketing strategy. All right, so here's our traditional reporting workflow. All right, it's going to take us 13 to 16 hours every time to do this report. Now, that's not the case for every type of report. There are different types of reporting, right? Things like quarterly, annual, or monthly. But we kind of start off with defining our objectives and metrics first, right? We set clear goals. We identify the key metrics that we'll measure for our overall performance. Then we got to figure out how we're going to collect that data. Data gathering is more of we're collecting data from multiple marketing platforms and sources. And so we're either having to export this, or we're having a direct API connection, or we might be using like a data warehouse, for example. So at the end of the day, we need to be able to gather this data so that we can consolidate it. So now we got to kind of figure out, okay, we're going to combine it, but we're going to organize it. Are we going to have a single view? Are we going to have a unified view? Or are we going to look at something that's in more of like a dashboard level type of format for business intelligence? Then we're going to analyze and interpret things, right? So we're going to look at manually, how do we review this data to identify things such as trends, patterns, and insights? We're going to create visualizations. So we're going to turn data into charts and dashboards for easier understanding, but we're going to also develop some insights and recommendations. Next, we're going to mainly translate this data findings into actionable insights and strategic recommendations, which takes a lot of time. And then finally, we prepare the report and we distribute the report. This is where we're going to have like the complete final report. You might share it with your stakeholders. In my case, I'm sharing it with clients. It's also a long and manual process, sometimes kind of just preparing it in different formats or having to present it in some cases, right? So this whole process that we're looking at on screen right now, 3 to maybe potentially upwards of 16 hours, maybe even longer. And so, in fact, actually, our team, we were recording this through our transformation of having more of AI approach and all these, humanized approaches. And we found that we spent 65 hours on our February reporting. We did our new AI process, and I'm happy to kind of share what that looks like as we kind of move through these slides to improve that. So what executives actually want, because a lot of these reports, right, like even myself as a CEO, I need to be informed from my team and look at the data. I need to be able to translate that to my clients. In executives, we're not necessarily just, we want a dashboard. We want actually something that we don't have to interpret. We just want something of, hey, what happened, why it happened, and what to do next, right? So we have kind of these three frameworks. So what happened? Executives want a clear and concise summary of performance without needing to interpret raw data or navigate dashboards themselves. Why did it happen? Well, understanding the reasons behind performance changes is critical because it's going to ultimately have the team do better work. And then what do we do next? Like, what's the most valuable thing? What are the recommendations? Like, what's the direction, a timeline? Who's responsible? Having these things in place is really going to kind of give a little bit more direction for executives. All right, so we've got a number of different business intelligence reporting tools that are out on the marketplace. These are just 4 that I have used personally in my experience throughout my career. I've used more than these. Maybe there's somebody that's watching this today that you're not using any of these. The point of this slide is not to necessarily say that you need to use one of these specific tools. It's more to just show you that these are some of the most commonly used, and maybe these are some options that you might want to consider as, kind of fundamentally, in my opinion, you want to have a dashboard for reporting that kind of just makes a nice presentation in the final deliverable of who you're trying to present it to. So NinjaCat, they're specifically focused on like marketing reporting. They work with a lot of agencies. They have some multi-channel data aggregation. They have the APIs, but it can be a little bit expensive, right? So if you're going to have a larger budget, then NinjaCat might make sense for you. Another tool out there, Tableau, powerful data visualization tool that's been around for a while. It also has strong API integrations and data modeling, but it does require a little bit more technical expertise, and it can also be expensive. Looker Studio, on the other hand, some people have had some issues with some of the numbers connecting or some of the API connections. Maybe you're going to use something like a third-party tool like Supermetrics or something like that, but it's pretty flexible, right? It's cost-effective. It does integrate with all the major Google ad platforms as well as the most commonly used marketing ad platforms. And it's supposed to be like an easy dashboard creation, right? It's got the real-time updates via connectors. And so for this reason, that's why I'm going to be showing that for our team today. It's not to say that Looker Studio is the tool that you have to use. The point is that you want to choose maybe potentially one of these tools or look at something else. And then finally, we have Microsoft BI. This is something that I also show in some of the other courses I've taught. It's a robust business intelligence tool with also data modeling and integration capabilities. It's used a lot in the enterprise level. I can tell you working in the healthcare vertical, a lot of people have been using Microsoft BI, but again, a little bit more complex and technical compared to some of these other marketing tools. All right, so next up in our kind of like AI workflow, right? We talked about dashboards. Well, the next thing we're going to need after that is we're going to need some large language models or some LLMs. And so kind of the idea here again is there's 4 different options here. It's not to say that one of these you have to use or that you cannot use all of these if you would like. I am seeing a lot of marketers modern day now, instead of just using one LLM, they're using multiple LLMs and they're kind of getting outputs from both of them. And then they're almost even having them kind of debate and come to a conclusion between them which one is the proposed solution, or what's the final solution. So we've got Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, and Copilot. If you're going to be doing anything with kind of like the Google like workspace or Google ecosystem, then that's going to be great for you. You're going to have access to like GA4 and Sheets. So going back to Gemini, right? If we're using kind of any of the Google Workspace options, then this is a good option. ChatGPT, on the other hand, it's kind of better for like structured insights and custom workflows. It has kind of some of that like deeper thinking and reasoning capabilities. Claude, on the other hand, it's really going viral recently. A lot of people are using this in the research and scientific space. I know a lot of developers are using this now for coding, but you can use this also for like long form analysis and detailed reports. It can handle some large data sets and kind of do some well-written insights around that, but you are going to need, pro version. Another thing I'd kind of point for all these tools is there are the free versions, but if you want to get the best insights and really, improve your reporting the most that you can, then it's going to be better for you to use the paid version. And then finally, we have Copilot, right? This is going to integrate really well with like Excel and the Microsoft ecosystem. So it's very good for that, but maybe not as flexible with some of the workflows. Also, if you want to look at these tools, right? I know a lot of people using ChatGPT and Gemini specifically for some of their image generation capabilities, such as DALL-E and Nano Banana 2. All right, so let's kind of like, now that we've got a quick little intro of, all right, we're going to need a dashboard. Check. Most marketers are doing that, or you're trying to do that. You've been doing that to automate, not having to go into your systems and pull all this manually, and you're creating some nice visualizations. Okay, next step, large language model. Check. I got that tool as well. I'm going to need that for, kind of helping me write the insights from potentially a dashboard or something like that. Many marketers are doing that. Everybody's using different ones. Maybe you're using multiple. What's kind of happening in this whole process, as you can kind of see in our diagram here to the right, you're still going to have the human in the loop, right? It's going to change how you do reporting, but we're upgrading. So we're not getting any replacement here. So here's kind of a stat, right, that shows that 92% of marketers now are using AI in marketing, right? It's kind of like, wild to think only 2 or 3 years ago, large language models had a consumer-facing application in which we're using that now as marketers on a daily basis. But what is AI? Where does that fit in? What is it doing in our case of reporting? So AI is essentially the important thing. You need to understand it's upgrading our opportunity by doing some of these repetitive, time-consuming parts of the reporting process. What are those things that we would do manually as a marketer? Well, detecting patterns, or maybe we have so much data, right? Then I used to have somebody in my profession they would call this the data analysis paralysis. Right? You have so much data, you have to kind of summarize that data. It's maybe difficult to do so, especially when you have multiple channels or multiple vendors or multiple partners. Then you're turning those numbers into narratives, right? So that's like data storytelling, and that is a true skill. I like to think of it as like taking a data analyst and taking a journalism major and putting those two people in the room, and there's your data storytelling, right? How do I connect the numbers to this story that I'm trying to tell? And then you need to identify any anomalies, right? When we look at anomalies in data, we can kind of decipher some things that might alter our overall direction. So another thing we need to kind of think about when we're thinking about this human in the loop approach and why we can't fully just give AI reports and kind of be done with it is, well, there's some data privacy practices, right? And those are constantly changing, whether they're at the national, regional, or international level. There are policies around that. I'm not going to go too far into like what are the actual regulations around this. I'm going to just kind of give you 4 basic concepts that you should know as a marketer if you're watching this video. If you don't, this is a good review for you. So personally identifiable information, right? Things like names, emails, phone numbers, right? We don't want to generally upload that information into an LLM. Now, if your organization has kind of like a closed network, a closed source in which you can make sure that that information isn't being shared elsewhere, or maybe you have your own proprietary large language model that you've created for your business. That totally is an option. The other thing is like sensitive data, right? So if you're talking about like healthcare vertical, financial records, logins, passwords, emails, things like that, right? We probably don't want to be uploading that either to LLMs. Another example would be things like confidential or proprietary data. So think about like margins, pricing, maybe some strategic documents on your methodology. And then finally, what is like the actual maybe best option is actually something like aggregated data, right? So it's summarizing the data. It doesn't actually have any information on the individual, or it's not sensitive. And then it's kind of also still important in that process, though, even though that's data that we want to use, we still need to make sure that it's actually properly aggregated before we hopefully start analyzing it, right? So these are kind of some of the things that we need to make sure that we have in place kind of for risk management, being ethical, and kind of making sure that we are in compliance with current data privacy laws. Those 4 fundamental things will go very far for us. All right, so what is the actual AI of this, or what is the automation? So here's kind of like an automated workflow, and this is something I'll be kind of talking about as more an advanced approach towards the end of today's workshop. But first thing you want to do in your reporting system setup is you want to have centralized data, right? So this might be something that is going to save you a ton of time kind of getting all this data into a single place, so you're not having to be in multiple places at once. Think about this as like a unified view. In our case, we use like a Looker dashboard. I will be showing and demoing a real example of a Looker dashboard as we get to that. But yeah, you want to have somewhere where you've got everything connected. Very basic principle most marketers understand. I have multiple data sources or marketing platforms. I'm going to connect those, and then those are going to populate into a centralized place. Next thing we got to do is we're going to have something that is almost like agentic, right? Meaning, hey, we're going to have AI do something for us. And in this case, we're going to refer to this as like a custom GPT. So custom GPT, why do we need a custom GPT? Is because we want to customize, number one, or personalize our content that we put out. Number two, we really want to train these large language models, because if you are a marketer and you've been using Gemini or ChatGPT, you've probably found some hallucinations in your prompting, right? I'm not going to get too deep into prompting for today, but one of the basic things is, did I give it the actual correct pre-prompting materials to narrow the focus down? Have I given it the right tone? Have I given it the right role? Have I given it the right context? Do I have constraints in place, right? These are basic principles of prompting in which we can kind of build these into a custom GPT so that they follow these rules over and over and over again. Then we kind of prepare and export this updated data. So we're going to download the data, we're going to format it, we're going to clean it, right? For example, like if there were some phone numbers missing, or we're trying to remove the phone numbers, or if we had first name, last name, maybe we're going to anonymize the names and turn those into like, Red Rover and Blue Sally, just making those things up. Maybe you're going to have a secret key in which you're going to kind of clean that data. Then you're going to take your aggregate data or your anonymized data, your cleansed data is a nice way of saying it. And you're going to input that data into AI. So that's where we're going to go into those large language models that we were just looking at. And you're going to upload that uploaded data into your custom GPT. So, another thing, in our case, we're going to be using Looker Studio for today's demo, and we're going to be using ChatGPT for our large language model. If you want to use any of those other tools, perfectly fine, right? For example, if you're using Google, you can create a Google Gem, which is the equivalent to a custom GPT. So once you've got that information in there, we're kind of saying like, here's the proper context, here's the output that I'm looking for. Now go ahead and generate some insights and recommendations. We've got human review and prompt refinement there after we get that output, right? That output's not going to take that long if we've done good prompting and pre-prompting. We're going to get this output, but then, as we were talking about, these things still hallucinate. They're not perfect. So you're going to review the outputs, you're going to validate the accuracy, and then you're going to refine prompts to improve clarity, depth, and the relevance of the insights. Then you're going to kind of take that and structure your final report. That's going to have like your clear insights and recommendations in like your dashboard. And then you're going to deliver and share this report. You're going to download it and you're going to hopefully share it with people that care about this report. And you have different audiences, right? So we want to just keep that in mind as well too. All right, what we're looking at now is we are looking at the backend custom GPT instructions for custom GPT, right? So if we were going to ChatGPT, you would see this, for example, on your left-hand side here. And you could see that we've got our custom GPT right here. And then if I go in and I click edit GPT, I'm going to have a name, description, instructions, some starters, and knowledge, right? These knowledges are all the files that we've used in our pre-prompting. And we've also got all of our capabilities turned on: web search, canvas, image generation, code interpreter, and we're not kind of preferring in a model. If we wanted to change it, maybe it might make sense for insights and reporting to have thinking. I've seen some good results from that. Okay, but this is our basic backend. So what you're seeing right now, these are the instructions. I have this in a Google Doc. It makes it very easy for our team to be able to go in and edit this. And ultimately, you know, it's just more real-time feedback for us to kind of have this as a centralized place. We can go in and we can update the back end of our custom GPT whenever we need to, right? Usually one person is owning that. So we have a role, we have a task, we have a certain tone and style, we have our data analysis priority of how do we look at this data, what do we know what's important, then we have kind of our output structure. So we're saying, you know, we need some insights and recommendations, we've got some very specific KPIs and metrics outlined, and then we have an overall, hey, what does this data mean? What are our recommendations? And then some final rules, right? So here's kind of like where this all happens, right? This is our custom GPT instructions. And then we would have like a Looker dashboard, right? So we're going to have to feed into our prompt actually a dashboard. So let's say if I was doing February, right? Here's my February example. And then I've got some text from like a previous month or campaign. So I would just come in and edit this. And maybe like remove these things, right? So that I'm giving it more of a structured, like what I'm trying to do here is in this process, this is a template that our team already has for reporting for this client. And so I'm just able to come in here and kind of remove these from previous reports and say, this is the output structure that I need, right? Based on my instructions. So I'm cleaning this up. I just automated all of the numbers, right? For our scorecard KPIs here at the top. I'm going to publish and update our dashboard. And then I might just kind of like spot check, right? For February, like, does everything else look good? Like, okay, I've got our Google Ads data in here. I've got our demographics and regions. I've got our creative insights already in there. And then here's our Google Analytics 4 data. We're looking at like, you know, different types of referral sources and maybe some of their conversion metrics. This client's a wedding planning client for some context. They're looking for form fills generally. And then here's their organic. And finally, their CRM system. Okay, so now that I have all of this data kind of unified, right? And I've given my custom GPT some very specific instructions. You can see I've also got these past reports, right? So that's another thing, right? When I'm narrowing the focus down, I'm not saying, go look at lifetime data. I'm saying, go look at this specific month and kind of correlate these past reports. So you can see we just got done, actually, it's April right now, right? So that's where you're seeing some of these other ones. But if I was just doing February, for example, and I don't want to maybe include these future state ones, right? Then I would probably remove the February and kind of keep these other past ones, right? So once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and click update. And first thing it's going to do is going to give me a little message saying you want to view your GPT. Heck yes. Okay. And then there's kind of this like basic prompt. This is like my conversation starter. So let's go back to the edit of the GPT. So my basic starter is generate insights for the month of, And then in this case, this is February 2026 based on the attached February dashboard report using our template instructions, right? So that's kind of my like basic one. So I'm gonna go ahead and update this. And now I'm gonna view it. And I'm gonna go get our dashboard now as the next step. So I'm gonna go back to our dashboard and I'm going to download this dashboard. I'm gonna get all the pages and it's gonna be in a PDF format. So I'm gonna download that. So now I'm gonna upload this report and then I'm gonna write the insights. And there we go. There is our output, right? So you're gonna see this generate all these insights. Now, why are these insights better than just using like a basic prompt? Is because I fed it specific data. I gave it a very good prompting structure that's very clear. And I also kind of provided like a dashboard with like the relevant narrow focus of that data, right? I'm not doing like an API connection or overloading it with too much data. I'm keeping it very narrow. And then I'm getting a very good output here of like what that final output would be. Now, see, you can kind of see I have that in here, right? And sometimes it may kind of like not format things correctly. So that really comes back to this master instructions, right? Of figuring out like what is the actual prompt that I need. So that's kind of our data. We get the final insights, right? We would copy these guys in and we would put them into the dashboard. So, you could put these in a Google Doc. I'll just show you as like an example. We would go in here and paste that in and then maybe edit it down from there. Or we would have this in a Google Doc and our team would go through that. This is going to save you a ton of time in writing these insights. Now, one thing that you want to go through when you're reviewing some of these insights is you definitely want to check these numbers. Kind of nice, actually, that a lot of these are highlighted in bold. And it is giving you a source. So it's saying, this is coming from your dashboard report that you have seen. But that's always one thing we want to check kind of at this stage of the process is, you're going to review and you're going to validate it. You're going to maybe refine your prompt. If I wanted to go in and target something like, tell me more about how I could better target this audience. Now we could also kind of go into like chain of thought prompting. It's saying, hey, you don't have a traffic problem, you have a targeting precision problem. Like maybe go with more high intent, go with full service wedding planner cost or higher wedding planner Colorado. Those are high intent based keywords, right? So thinking about like, you want to get like a good immediate output, but as you're kind of like writing your insights, if you want to kind of go down this, experiential opportunity to see if you can improve them even further, then that's really strategic prompting. And so that's what I wanted to kind of demo is that whole process of, well, what does this actually look like, Benjamin? Well, the answer is, I told you at the beginning of this workshop today that it took us about 65 hours to do our February reporting. We're now getting out of March reporting. We're in April now. So it took us about 30 hours in total for March reporting to complete 12 reports. So we saved about 54% of our time having this repeatable AI reporting workflow, right? That gave us 35 extra hours in March to focus on building new strategies and executing them for our clients. So that process and review is update and export the data, generate insights with AI. You can use this as like a custom GPT. You're going to review and finalize a report. That's really important where you're going to have the human in the loop approach. You're going to edit things. You're going to polish it. You're going to make it executive ready. Then you're going to download and share it, right? And I just kind of showed you that quick demo actually in this workshop, taking us what? 5 to 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes max. Okay, so let's go back to our demo. And we one thing that I do want to show is kind of how we have gone about doing this, right? So this was like the initial pass where we got all this. Okay, I'm not gonna scroll through all that for you guys for right now. But then we also have a like a second version of this. I'm going to open that up. Okay, so this is our refined version now that we're looking. So you could see we changed some things. Like my team kind of came back to me and said, Benjamin, it'd be helpful if you put in the client budget per month. Or if we kind of like updated the summary insights to be a little bit more defined, like how are we using our CRM data? Hey, maybe this was not relevant. Let's remove this. Let's delete that information, right? So that's why they highlighted those things in red. And then yellow are things that they changed. So I actually had our team go through our instructions and say, well, hey, ChatGPT gave me this output, but I was really looking for this. It wasn't that it was maybe hallucinating, but I was trying to get something more that looks like this, or maybe it did hallucinate. So you should have your team go through an exercise like this, right? And so what I would do for this is I would take the things in red and I would delete those. Okay, now I can take this information, copy it. I can go back to our custom GPT and I can edit it. And I can go back into our instructions here now and repaste those things in. And I'm going to get a very different output now, right? Because I've refined the instructions. So if I update it, let's go back to viewing our GPT. I've already got my conversation starter. I just need to make sure I attach the report again. Another thing, just making sure I don't want to confuse it. Maybe if I had February in here, right, I want to make sure that's removed, but I have that. Sometimes it'll take a second. All right, here we go, right? This looks a little bit more buttoned up. It's very tight now. It's not as long. So very different outputs we're going to get based on the data we provided and the instructions and frameworks that are in place. Okay, so important thing to understand there is that we don't always want to just create it and forget it. There is a refinement process that we can have in this so that we can get better outputs, right? And having your team, having the people that are the data doing the reporting on a daily basis, they're going to be your golden nuggets of how do I improve this instructions on the back end. All right, so benefits should be popping off as you're seeing this process, right? Like it's going to save you hours every month. You're going to get faster insights and better decisions. You're going to ultimately shift from reporting to strategy. I think that's the big thing, right? Like reporting using AI, yes, of course it should save us tons of time. But what we're really trying to do is we're trying to actually innovate and think of things that we may not have thought for in the past. Then you're going to get consistency, which is great, right? That's going to ensure that every report follows the same format, depth, quality. It's going to build professionalism and trust with your clients. And that's going to kind of eliminate, let's say, if you needed to replace somebody that's doing a certain process, or, maybe the process changes, right? We want to have those kind of SOPs in place. It's scalable. It can be scalable across multiple clients or campaigns. And then, the big thing is you spend a lot of time in reporting on repetitive tasks. I know myself, one of the things that was very frustrating throughout my reporting experiences was that I would have to manually check numbers. I would manually have to check our dashboard numbers versus going into the in-platform metrics. I'd have to manually check in on things that my team was talking about, that were writing the insights and saying, where did you get this? How did you validate this? What evidence do you have in place? And then ultimately, all of this could be scalable for enterprise. So if you're an enterprise business, and you're handling high amounts of data volume businesses or clients, then you want to have some automated processes in place. So not every client is so different, right? I know for myself, we got to a place, right? 65 hours in reporting to get that down to 30 that's manageable for us now in a given month. So here are some of the common mistakes that I see marketers making today with AI BI reporting. They are using weak prompts. They have no structured framework. It's inconsistent. They have one report that they show 1 month to a client, and then the next month they give the client another new report, right? Now, obviously, as you build dashboards and you work through this process for your organization, you're going to update your reports. That's just natural. But you want to try to maybe think of it as like a timeline of like maybe the first 2 or 3 months, right? That's a good period of time to really align on what are our KPIs, what's the story we're trying to tell, who are our stakeholders, how do they like to interpret the information, get that buttoned up with them in the first couple of months, and then really you should be automating from there. You shouldn't be changing a report every month. And boy, can I tell you some nightmare stories about having to do that with certain clients. We're updating the report every month, almost for an entire year. All right, so here's the future. We're going to automate this further on in the future. So if you can next take the concepts that you've learned today and you're doing some of that stuff that I told you, like cleaning the insights or feeding the dashboard into ChatGPT, all of those steps can be further automated. We might use something like Zapier or Make.com. This will actually connect your reporting process with tools that you need to kind of automate the data flow between dashboards, AI tools, and reporting outputs. Then you have the end-to-end workflow automation, which is the data updates, insight generation, report delivery. You're just trying to remove any of those like pipeline things. And you can have trigger-based reporting, which you're saying like set up this workflow to run when this data is available. So for example, maybe a better workflow could be, hey, it's April 5th, and now all the data is good for data attribution because we have delayed attribution. Let's go ahead now and run this report. Okay, great. We're going to have this automation, which removes all of the insights, and it's going to upload it into the large language model. And then once that's done, it's going to send an email to somebody on our team to review the manual insights. As an example, that's an example of a trigger. Scaled and always on reporting. This is more of like it's running in the background. It's making always up-to-date insights. Now, a lot of those BI tools, again, they already have AI built into them, right? They have like AI agentic capabilities. One of the things you should be taking away from today is the better that you can narrow, the better that you can have clear prompting instructions, the better that you can have relevant examples of what the final deliverable needs to look like, giving it context of the audience. These are all things that the agent and some of these built-in BI tools does not know. And a lot of people are not providing that information, and that's why we're kind of using these custom GPTs. All right, so if you found some value today, we have a full course available on this topic. It's called AI Powered BI, Faster Insights, Better Decisions. This workshop introduces kind of the fundamental components of that course, but the course is actually going to provide the full framework and system that you actually need to understand in order to do this. So with that, I want to kind of offer to the audience and anybody, what would be included in this course? Well, they would include things such as the AI reporting foundations. It would include prompt engineering for analysts, dashboard analysis, right? We got some basic examples of that today in Looker, executive reporting, and reporting automation. And all this includes practical resources. So we give you the templates, the prompts, the workflows, everything you need to do exactly what I've kind of covered in kind of an intro to that. Now, as a special discount to anybody watching this video, showing up to this workshop, we're going to give you an offer to buy our course for $100 off. And we're giving this because, number one, we know that, paying a lot of money to learn this stuff might kind of crunch your wallet a little bit, but also, if you've got to show up today, you hopefully got some value and, you want to continue kind of building on that momentum. So if you can, feel free to scan this QR code and you can get our course. And thank you so much. Hope you have some insights ready to go in your new AI BI reporting process soon.